This chapter is about legal and ethical issues. We'll talk about them in general and then a little bit more in detail of what things that are a little bit different in mental health nursing. So you know that we do have a lot of challenges with dealing with good and evil, life and death for our patients, ethical dilemmas, moral dilemmas. We have guidelines to help us to decide this. We have ethics, bioethics, which is ethics that are for medical situations. We have a moral standard that we value, and we have values that are important to us. Something we may need to do with some of these moral dilemmas is to decide what our own values are and clarify that and realize that our values may not be the same as the people that we are taking care of. So there may be some differences there. And then we all have rights that we expect that we are either entitled to because we're a human being or because there are laws that say that we should do this. So this just kind of goes over what these core concepts are. Ethics, a branch of philosophy that helps us to decide what's right and what's wrong. Bioethics, like I said, is specific to medical issues. And then our moral behavior and this how we should behave and how we treat other people. Values is what is important to us, what we want. That would go for what your patients believe in and what they want. Um, Values clarification, just looking at ourselves before we decide on the values of others. What are our values? How are they maybe different from the people that we are caring for? And how we deal with them in a good manner if their values are very different than our own. And then again, the rights, what we are entitled to, either ethically or by established laws. So we have absolute rights, or one, there's no restriction whatsoever on the individual's entitlement to that right. And then there are legal rights, and those are the ones that society has agreed upon and they have been formalized into a law. We have several different agencies who have um, put together patient rights, and the ANA, American Nurses Association, also has a code of ethics for nurses. So, ethical considerations, we have some theoretical perspectives. Utilitarianism is the theory that what we do should bring on the end result that does the best or the most good for the most people. Kantianism suggests that decisions and actions are bound by a sense of duty, so that we have a duty to do this because it's my duty, I must do this. Um, Made out of respect for moral laws because it's the right thing to do, so this is what we must do because it is our duty. So, divine command ethics, these are ethical decisions that should be made by looking at what God or what Jesus Christ would have had us do. So, looking at the way we make religious decisions. So, we work in a Catholic institution, so we do have ethics that are based on our Catholic religion, and that makes a difference in what kind of decisions that we make. Natural law is just based on the writings of St. Thomas Aquinas, and it is that humans are able to make a differentiation between what is good and what is evil, and that can help them direct their decision making. And the last one is ethical egoism, and that is looking at what is right and good for the individual that is making the decision. So, ethical dilemmas, they are situations where individuals make a choice between two equally unfavorable alternatives. And taking no action is considered an action. So, making no um, decision or no action is also considered to be a part of this. Um, in healthcare, we have ethical dilemmas that deal with life and death. When do we take someone off life support? Who do we save in a situation where the mom and the baby only one can survive? So we have ethical situations where we need a panel of people to talk about what we need to do, look at all the situation and make a decision. Um, an ethical committee is formal, usually consists of doctors, usually a religious person, maybe nurses, other people who have a um, stake in this, possibly family members, when we're looking at what we're doing with a patient. And those decisions help to look at all sides of the problem and then take a action that is the best action for the person that we are discussing. So ethical principles are fundamental guidelines that influence the decision making. Autonomy is the right of people to determine their own destinies and assume that individuals are capable of making that choice for themselves. Beneficence is the duty to benefit others by doing good. Nurses who act in the interest of their patients are beneficent. This includes knowing when to act on the patient's behalf. Advocacy is another um, principle that nurses use a lot, and that is simply by being a supporter or defender, advocating for maybe our patient or our family members that we're taking care of. Non malfeasance is simply not doing anything that will cause harm to the person. Justice is the idea that everyone has the right to be treated equally, regardless of race, sex, marital status, diagnosis, social standing, religious belief, economic level, so that everyone has the same rights as everyone else. So that is in order to make sure that the people who may be um, marginalized in our societies have the same rights and ethical principles for their care as we do for anyone else. And then veracity is the duty to be truthful. Clients have the right to know what their diagnosis is, what their treatment is, and what their prognosis is. We have gone from the doctor's always right. So he can tell me what he thinks I need to know to I have the right to know everything about my situation. So when we have an ethical dilemma, um, this is kind of a model of how you would do that. So first thing you're going to do is assess. So you're going to get subjective and objective data about what's happening. We want to consider the personal values of the people involved as well as what the ethical dilemma is. Then we want to identify what the conflict is and what um, look at the different actions that might be taken. Planning is then when we want to explore the benefits or the consequences of each alternative, then consider the principles of the ethical theories and suggest one. Then implementation is going to be acting on the decision that was made and communicate that decision to other people. And then we're going to evaluate the outcome of this ethical decision. Okay, in mental health nursing, clients have certain rights. They have the right to get treatment. So that means that if you come to the hospital, you have the right to be treated, and that goes for every patient. But if you come to the hospital with a mental health issue, you have the right to have some type of appropriate treatment. We can't deny you because you have a mental health issue rather than a medical issue. You also have the right to refuse treatment. There are very few um, things that let us involuntarily treat someone. They have to be a danger to themselves or a danger to someone else, and it has to be an immediate, not a past thing, not a something that might happen. We have to look, are we going to prevent death or serious harm to that patient or someone else? They also may include medication, and the only time we can make them take medication is if they are attempting to harm themselves or someone else, or we have a court order that says they need treatment. Then they have the right to the least restrictive treatment alternative. So if someone is simply a little depressed, they have the right to have outpatient treatment rather than inpatient treatment. Um, Community treatment rather than being hospitalized or kept in a long-term facility. So least restrictive that meets their needs. So each state has a Nurse Practice Act, and every nurse in the state are expected to act in a way that is outlined in that Nurse Practice Act. There are different types of laws. Statutory laws are ones that are made by a state legislator or the Congress, and common laws come from previously litigated cases where there is a decision that has been made that is similar to what is happening in your situation. Civil law is for private and property rights of individuals and businesses. Um, Private individuals or groups may bring legal action to a court for a breach of these civil laws. There are two different types, torts and contracts. A tort is something, it's a violation of civil law in which the individual has been wronged. One party claims wrongful conduct on the part of the others, and the other one seeks compensation. That can be either something that was done intentionally or unintentionally. In contract action, one party claims that the other party has failed to fulfill the obligation and breached the contract that they had. Criminal law protects the public from the actions of others that are detrimental to the public welfare. It includes punishment for those who are found to have engaged in this conduct, which can be from very serious things like murder or assault to things like drug charges. So Legal issues in mental health nursing. So confidentiality and the right to privacy. HIPAA provides for guidelines for how this can be. Um, Doctrines of privileged communications gives a person the right to keep their information confidential. There are some exceptions. A duty to warn. That's when someone has made a legitimate threat against another person to do them harm. And then suspected child or elder abuse is an exception also. If we suspect or know of those, we need to report. We are mandated reporters as nurses and healthcare workers. Informed consent. We need to make sure that the person has all the information before they consent to some type of treatment. So they need to know what could happen, what is expected to happen, any side effects that could happen. Um, so those are things that we need to do. So we need to make sure that the patient has knowledge of what is happening, that they are competent to make that informed consent. Someone who has end stage Alzheimer's probably is not able to make a competent informed consent. So they may have to have a legal representative, power of attorney, who makes that decision for them. And then the person has to be giving their consent of their own free will. We can't pressure someone into making, to consenting against their own will. So, in addition to that, restraints and seclusion. There are very strict rules on when seclusion and restraint can be used. Um, and if it is used, it has to be discontinued at the earliest possible time. The only times we can use this is when someone is in imminent danger of harming themselves or harming someone else. It cannot be used as a punitive measure. If it is, we can be charged with false imprisonment, and that is keeping someone against their will. So, state laws give us guidelines when we do use restraints and seclusion. Um, we have to have physician's orders. It can be started by a nurse, but we have to have a physician order within 1 hour of restraints being started. We have to get renewals of those orders in 4 hours if the person is an adult, in 2 hours if they are an adolescent, and every hour if they are younger than 9 years old. An in-person evaluation has to be conducted within 1 hour of initiating restraint or seclusion, usually by a supervising nurse or physician. And patients need to be monitored continuously, either in person or through audio and video. Um, and they need to be checked every 15 minutes, and this needs to be documented. Most patient charting methods have a place to actually chart this in the Epic chart. Staff who are involved in restraining and secluding patients need to be trained how to monitor their physical and psychological well-being and how to effectively restrain and seclude someone without causing them any harm. The in your module this week, I put in paperwork for the state of Illinois, which talks about a voluntary admission, someone coming into a mental health unit voluntarily, the involuntary paperwork, patient rights when they are admitted to a mental health unit, and restrictions of rights. Like if someone's making phone calls and they are harassing someone and we want to stop that, we have to give them a restriction of rights and tell them what that is, give them paperwork, and tell them how they can um, contest this if they wish, and other people that we need to inform that they choose that their rights have been restricted. So, voluntary versus involuntary uh, admissions or commitments. Um, Voluntary admission occurs when the person makes an application to the institution, asks for treatment. Um, the the book says that people can sign out of the hospital at any time, unless it's determined they are harmful to themselves or others. While that is true, they may sign out. There is a form that they need to fill out in the state of Illinois, and it is a 5-day request for release, which gives the um, treating physician 5 days to either decide that the person is not safe to be discharged and then they go through an involuntary commitment, or they come to the agreement that the person is okay and can be discharged. But there are 5 business days that the doctor can legally keep that person in the hospital in the state of Illinois. For involuntary admissions, this is a person who is not um, agreeable to treatment. They may have been committed through a court hearing, um, or they may have been displaying behavior that is clearly dangerous to themselves or to other people. Um, there is a court hearing that is held if someone is involuntarily admitted, and this happens in the hospital, and the person is um, assigned a lawyer, a public defender, to help them if they wish to make those, to try to be discharged. And then there is an actual court hearing where the judge comes, the lawyers come, and the doctor provides the case of why the person needs to be in the hospital, and then the person who's been committed has that option to also say why they shouldn't be committed. Um, if the judge decides they don't need to be in the hospital, then they will be discharged. Um, a gravely disabled person also may be um, involuntarily committed. So, this is a person who is unable to keep themselves safe without the help of someone else. That doesn't happen very often. Um, Sometimes it happens with someone who is um, older, maybe a person with Alzheimer's who is living alone and unable to care for themselves anymore, not able to make sure that they have food and able to care for themselves. But usually it's because of behavior that someone is involuntarily committed. And as we talk about this, um, then we'll talk about what diagnoses are more likely to be involuntarily admitted and what behaviors you're likely to say. But the most often is that a person is in danger to the safety of their self or to someone else. So, liability, negligence, failing to exercise the care towards others that a reasonable person of their same stature would have done. So either doing something that you would not do or not doing something that a reasonable person would do. And then malpractice is simply doing acting in a way that a professional, it doesn't mean the standards of competence and results in provable damage to the patient. So doing something to harm that patient. So this slide just kind of goes over the type of lawsuits that most typically happen in psychiatric nursing. Breach of confidentiality. Confidentiality in mental health is kind of HIPAA on steroids. It's even more restrictive simply because of the stigma of mental health treatment that can affect a person. Defamation of character, libel, or slander. Um, if you defamation of character, if it's in writing, it's libel. If it's spoken, it's slander. So libel could be something that you have charted that is false or malicious. So that's why we want to keep our charting on behaviors factual and not opinionated. Invasion of privacy is searching a person we don't have any reason to, um, not allowing them to have privacy, um, assault, um, fear that the person is going to touch you without consent, and battery is actually touching the person. Um, you do not have to cause harm or injury for these charges to be made. And you can be charged with false imprisonment for holding a client either physically or with restraints or seclusion if there is not an emergency situation happening. So, protecting yourself from liability, communicating effectively, um, making sure everyone understands what's going on, using the SBAR model, um, talking about the situation, the background, the assessment, and recommendations is a good, effective way of communication. Um, making sure that you completely and accurately document in the medical record. Um, complying with the standards of care. Looking at those guidelines that the ANA has for specific hospital policies for the actions that you are taking. Knowing the client, understanding them, listening to them, and explaining things to them about what's happening in their care. And then being able to practice within your scope of practice, adhering to the ANA standards and the State Board of Nursing in the state that you practice in, plus using hospital policy and continuing education to make sure that you are practicing in the best way you possibly could.